everyone, and welcome. Great to see you signing in to join us as always, and delighted you have. This will be an hour of your life you certainly will not regret. In fact, I think possibly a profoundly life-enhancing way to spend an hour of your life. And I know that having read the book that has inspired our event this evening. Sometimes it's the wrong way around. I can't quite work out, but here we go. In my screen, this is the book that has inspired the event, Why We Crave, What We Crave, and What to Do About It. I'm so effing hungry. And I'm delighted that we have with us the author of the book, who can tell us all about it with her great knowledge and experience and huge enthusiasm, which comes through on every page. Dr. Amy Shah is a medical doctor and nutrition expert. She has training from Cornell, from Columbia, and Harvard universities. And drawing from her background in internal medicine and immunology and allergy, as we'll hear, she has dedicated her practice to helping patients feel better and live healthier lives through an integrative and more holistic approach to wellness, all of which we will hear. Dr. Amy Shah, thank you very much for joining us from Arizona.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can we start with your title? It's very grabby, very catching. I'm so effing hungry. I'm wondering why you wanted to draw people in with a title like that.
Hannah, one of the things I realized over the last few years of looking at the research is that we are both hungry and we're sad. And really, it's because our gut bacteria are hungry and sad. And I think people don't usually make that connection. They think they're craving and wanting to eat all the time has nothing to do with mood, that food does not equal mood. And so the whole point of this book was to say, hey, we have created a monster in our world today, and we can turn this around through science, and we can be happier, more satisfied, and in the end, live longer because we're not as inflamed.
Who's created the monster?
I want to say, I don't want to say that there's any one person, but capitalism, the companies that create foods that are addictive, it's not our fault, really. It's like our biology is wired to want to eat these foods, do these activities. So it's not just food, it's like video games, social media, gambling, online, things that capture our dopamine pathway and keep us craving. So people think, oh, why don't I have any self-control? Why am I always craving the wrong thing? And my answer to that is, it's not really your fault. We live in a society that has understood the dopamine pathway and taken advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And now it's time for you to understand that pathway so you can take advantage of it.
I want to come more to that. When you're writing this, when you were writing and you sit down, do you have a particular reader or demographic, men, women, age in mind? Or is this for anyone and everyone living in this world today with the monster that we've created?
It's honestly for everyone. I did think of women in particular when I was writing this, and I have a daughter who's a teen, and I thought to myself, wow, we need to educate our moms and our dads so that we can teach the next generation that how to eat so that they're more even, how to eat for mood, how to eat for health, and not fall into the trap. It's only been really 80 years since all of this modernization has rapidly changed our food supply. And I think that it gets worse and worse, our generation, and then the next generation. So teenagers at this point are eating 80% ultra processed foods. And my argument in the book is that it's not really their fault. It's because they're following, they're kind of just going with what their body is telling them. And we need to teach them how to retrain that.
Mm. You mentioned your daughter, and it's a personal book in many ways. I wonder if you sort of could outline what your mission is and why it is a very personal mission on a few levels.
Yeah, I'm a mom. I have two children. I have a son and a daughter. And, my daughter in particular makes me really wonder about what kind of messaging we're sending to the girls, and about, this book is not just for us to feel better, to look better, to be stronger, to have less addictions to foods and other things. It's so that we can teach that to our children or our nephews, our nieces, our students, so that they can pass down this information to the next generation. It's something that we should all be learning from. It's the new science.
But you personally, wonder if you could tell people a little bit about your journey to where you've got to, and why you've written this book, and why you're on such an enthusiastic mission to change the world and to change society in this way.
Absolutely. So I came to the US when I was 5 years old with my parents, from India. And shortly after living in the US, probably 2 years or so, we got the devastating news. My dad, my grandmother, and every one of our family members that had come to the US was all diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Now, at the time, this was a death sentence because there's so many family members that we'd had, including my grandfather, who didn't even make it past the age of 60 because of the complications from diabetes. And they knew they had to eat less sugar, but they really knew nothing about how to control cravings, how to choose the right foods. So I really went on a mission to learn more about nutrition, how food affects the body. I went to nutrition school at Cornell and then wanted to learn more about it. So I went to medical school, and I really wanted to come back to help families like my own learn more about food and how it affects our body's inflammation levels and disease. And what I didn't realize back then is that not only does it affect inflammation, food affects diabetes and heart disease, but it also affects our mood and our behavior. And I thought that was so interesting because eating in a healthy way, feeding our gut bacteria, can actually make you healthy and happy in the moment, as well as helping you live longer in the long run.
So there's lots of exciting things that you tell us about our gut bacteria in terms of just how much we can control it. It's not too late, and I'm looking forward to getting to that. I just wonder if I could more generally ask you about whether you feel that you're a lone voice in this. Doctors seem to, you say, and it often seems to be the case, be very unaware of or seem to have very little education in terms of nutrition. And it seems so strange, more and more voices like yours calling out, more of us understanding just how essential nutrition is to our health, as you say, to our mental health, our physical health. Why is Western medicine still so slow to catch up on just how important these things are, the microbiome and even the diet?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's hard to figure out one reason. I think we're on a train that's turning around a little bit. So, for example, the younger medical students in the US and the UK are getting much more education and about nutrition. I think that the interests, corporate interests, we're pushing a different agenda, but I think that things are changing, and there are many, many new voices, including my own, saying that, hey, we should be taking a food first approach. It's the way out of this mess. And I think that if we really demand it as a population, you read this book and you say to, you want products that are going to feed your gut bacteria, or you improve your mood or improve your cravings. And that's how change happens. And for me, I thought, well, we might not see governmental change in our countries for many years, but at least we can start the process. Like, what I would love to see, and some countries have already started to do this, is label ultra processed foods, because they seem to be the worst offenders of driving our cravings out of control, our hunger out of control, making us overeat and be sick.
And you stress that this is not a diet book. And you're very keen to stress, we've talked about some of the enemies, and we'll talk about more of them. And we'll certainly talk about more about processed foods and food companies and the way society gears us in the wrong way towards the way we eat. But you're very keen to stress, quite often in the book, this is not a diet book. And diets are, well, you call them hijackers of our brain and our hunger. So why are you so keen to stress what this is not?
Because if you think about it, dieting uses the old technique of white knuckling it, meaning you sit down at a dinner and diets tell you that you are not supposed to eat anything that's served, not that bread, not the appetizer, not the dessert. And white knuckling, meaning like using willpower alone, doesn't work. We find this over and over again. I mean, look at New Year's resolution. It is, now just the third month into the year, and most people have broken most, if not all, of their New Year's resolutions, because it's not just about willpower. We can't just use willpower to get our way, get ourselves happy and healthy and, more successful. We have to change our habits, and I argue we have to change our food.
So tell us what you describe as the hunger puzzle.
Yeah, we live in a world that has really inundated us with messages of what food should be. We live in a world where we can't use our intuition anymore because there are messages. You might say, do I really want to eat a chocolate cake? Or is it because, my dopamine pathway has been set and now I crave chocolate cake every time I get stressed. So the hunger, you have to think of hunger as not only like a physiological need, but sometimes a psychological need and sometimes an emotional need.
How do you distinguish between the two? You talk about later in the book. How do you distinguish between real, genuine hunger and an emotional craving, or just something that is not a real physical hunger?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a trick in the book. And before I get into that trick, I wanted to tell you hunger and cravings and appetite are three different things. Yeah. They occur in different parts of the brain. Actually, they're not from the same areas. Hunger is a true need for nutrients, our physiological need for nutrients. Craving, on the other hand, is our need for pleasure. And it spans food, but it also spans so many other places. Like I mentioned, social media, gambling, porn addiction. I mean, there's so many, alcohol is a perfect example of the dopamine pathway. So cravings is part of the dopamine pathway, which is really concerned more with pleasure and the seeking of pleasure than it is with giving you nutrients. And then appetite. Yeah, sorry.
No, you keep going. Sorry.
Appetite is really the overall interest in food. So what I mean is, when we are sick, if you have an animal, you know this to be true. This is so clear. When they're sick, the animal kind of lays around and doesn't want to eat anything. The hungers and cravings are really, really low during the time of illness. That's when your appetite is very low, and appetite can be very high based on certain activities or hormonal changes, like poor sleep or going through menopause, or it can turn up the volume on both hunger and cravings.
You do talk about the ways in which we can regulate the various things that affect our hunger and our cravings. So hormones and the dopamine. I wonder if you could, the book is so useful, such practical advice. You never feel like you are going to have to struggle for the rest of your life. There are very easy things and ways in which we can hack our system to do those things.
Yeah, one of the things, and we talked about this, before we started, is sunlight. Now, it doesn't need to be bright and sunny. I know a lot of you are in a place where it's very gray. It just needs to be natural light. Natural light goes into your retina and it activates a part of your brain that releases a hormone that actually makes you feel more satisfied during the day. It makes you have better choices. So it's without a doubt that, anybody in any weather can go for a walk for 20 minutes and get some natural light. So the movement and the light input both help with regulating both your hunger and also dampening those cravings for unhealthy foods. So those are some easy things that you can do. I talk about in the book, like lots of hunger hacks and craving crushers that you can do. Like walnuts is a really good hunger hack because they light up a part of the brain that actually is involved with being more satisfied. So people who ate 48 grams of walnuts for 5 days straight, they were shown pictures of very enticing foods, and the brain activity was much lower in the dopamine areas than someone who did not have the walnuts for 5 days straight. So things like that, not that it will, these are little things on your journey that while you're changing your diet, while you're exercising, while you're improving your sleep, while you're doing all the things you can start to do to make changes right away. And you had asked me about cravings and hunger. And one of the tips I give in the book is to start to differentiate. Every time you want something, differentiate, is this a craving or am I truly looking for nutrients? Meaning that if it's right after lunch, you've had a good meal, or for you right now, it's right after dinner, you've had a great meal, and then all of a sudden you want that glass of wine or you want that chocolate bar, and the question you ask yourself is, am I actually looking for nutrients? Or am I just wanting something to light up that dopamine pathway, to give me a explosion of dopamine that I am craving? And one of the best ways to help you differentiate is to think, if I had a bowl of vegetables right now, would I want to eat them? Or would I say, no, thank you, it's actually just the wine I want, or the sugary snack that I want? Because if that's the case, then you're probably not necessarily hungry. You're more looking for a dopamine hit, and a dopamine hit can be very enticing, and you can get it in different ways. And I talk about in the book how to raise your levels of dopamine naturally so that you're not always looking for that dopamine hit.
Perhaps I was going to move on, but actually perhaps you could mention some of those ways, really interesting, useful ways of doing that.
Yeah, there are foods that have the amino acid tyrosine that actually is a precursor to dopamine. So you can raise your levels of baseline dopamine so that you're not always looking for other ways to get it. So high protein foods, dairy foods like yogurts, cottage cheese, eggs, nuts, berries, all these things that, kind of comprise a healthy breakfast, are ways that we can boost up our dopamine levels. Cherries, for example, are one of the weird ones that you might not think of that raise dopamine levels. So I give a list of dopamine producing or dopamine supporting, foods that you could start eating more of, especially in the beginning of the day, because dopamine is a close cousin of adrenaline. And so in the beginning of the day, you want that, go, go, go chemical to make you feel more alert and awake and keep you going. So that is having a high dopamine breakfast is something that you can easily do to hack yourself into not having such bad cravings for sweetened and junk food and other bad things that raise dopamine levels.
It's really